Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. It is great to have you here. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. It is great to have you with us here as well. It's Wednesday, and we got a lot to talk about. We're going to focus on the markets like we do on Wednesdays. We got Neil Townsend from GrainFox will be here today. GrainFox, a great app and service trying to help you steer through a really, really difficult market time. That's a nice way to describe it. A lot of bearish tone out there, but we can't put our head in the sand. We got to market through this kind of adversity, and I know that you are trying to do your best. We'll get Neil's takes on what's happening in crops like spring wheat, canola, durum, corn, and others. So we'll cover that today. We've also got time today for the top ag news stories of the day. And Todd Hyra from SeCan will be here for a product spotlight as well. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we would love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Or why not pick up the phone and dial this number, 855-776-6147. You dial it, you press the number 3, and the best part is you just leave me a voicemail. You don't even got to come on the show live. It's easy. You don't got to be worried and have like stage fright or anything like that. 855-776-6147. Very sad news in the fact that former Minister of Agriculture in Saskatchewan, Lyle Stewart, passed away after quite a lengthy battle with cancer. He was 73 years old, and Stewart served as a member of the provincial legislature from 1999 through 2023. He served as the province's ag minister under Premier Brad Wall and Scott Moe from 2012 until 2018, and then he stepped down from his cabinet post to undergo treatment for colon cancer. He also underwent treatment for prostate cancer in 2014. So thoughts are with the Stewart family. Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, had some very kind words for Lyle Stewart. He posted on X that Lyle was a man of few words, which is unusual for a politician, but you always knew where he stood. His quiet strength and dedication to the people he served were an example to all of us who served with him. And he said, Lyle was a good friend, and I will miss him a lot. Scott Moe, Premier Moe, also said that the legislature will lower the flags to half-mast in Stewart's honor. It's interesting, based on the timeline of when Lyall was the ag minister, it's kind of at the same time that Real Ag was really getting going, and that 12 to 18. And I have some very fond personal memories of Minister Stewart. And I remember in 2012, it would be, he was named as the ag minister. I think it was like on the Thursday or Friday. Well, the following Monday, he had to do his first appearance as ag minister, and I was there. I was emceeing the Saskatchewan Stock Growers annual general meeting, and it was in the Cypress Hills. And I remember it because it was like in the spring, and it snowed about like 5 feet of snow in the Cypress Hills. But there was a real contentious issue that day as well. There was some sort of changes for pasture regulations. I can't remember, but I remember everybody, all the ranchers there, being irate at the province, being irate at the feds, And Lyall was thrown into the hornet's nest. And, not known to be the, speaking and stuff like that. Like as Premier Mo talks about, he was quiet. He held his own and he got through it. And I just remember thinking, oh boy, he's got to be wondering, how did I get this post? What did I do to deserve this? Because he was thrown into the boiling pot of water that first day, that first public appearance as the ag minister. I also remember, and I don't know what year it would have been, but it was either at Ag in Motion or it was the Farm Progress Show in Regina at the time. But I remember that the wheat growers were holding a barbecue. And so it was at, I believe it was at Kloss's shop or like a Kloss dealer shop. That's what I kind of remember. And Stewart had gone and gave a presentation or, basically said welcome words, welcome to everybody that's there. And it was a very lighthearted, easy evening. And one of the things that I had gone up and by this time, Lyle knew me and I knew him. And I walked up and, he says, "Hey, Shaun." And I said, "Great to see you, Minister Stewart. And would you mind doing an interview while we're here and just talk about how things are looking in Saskatchewan?" And he said, "Well, yeah, sure, I'll do that, but on one condition." Now, I want to set the stage here. Typically, when you ask a Minister of Agriculture for an interview, there's a handler very close to them, and they're like the gatekeeper. They're the protector. They jump in between, and they'll say, how minister's only got so many minutes. He's busy. What are the topics? What are the questions? Like they do their thing. They do their job. And Minister Stewart really wasn't like that. I don't know if he even had a handler that day with him. And he said, "We got one condition." And that condition was that we had time to have a beer together too, because he had questions for me about what I was hearing, what was going on in the province. So that's just the kind of person that Lyle Stewart was. So he will definitely be remembered very well in the province of Saskatchewan, missed by friends, by colleagues, and the industry of agriculture. So thoughts are definitely with the Stewart family. Let's take a break. We've got markets coming up here on RealAg Radio with Neil Townsend of GrainFox right after this. We are joined right now by the Canadian consultant for Helena, Patrick Lyall.
Helena is a leading company that delivers formulation technology into the ag industry across the U.S., and a number of those work excellently up here in Canada.
Why do you get excited about research?
Probably 50 years there's been data out there that has proven that good humic product can have an excellent return on investment. Research delivers that to almost anybody who grows a crop and adds it into their fertilizer blend the year of application. All across Canada, we have these different types of soils and fits into almost any different application you can come across. And if we can increase the amount of nutrients, then you just have a much higher quality product that you're able to grow that season. Yeah. These biostimulants can be used to take your nutrient use efficiency. Adding in the right biostimulants such as Resurge can bump that from 40 to 60, perhaps up to 50 to 80, making that investment much more valuable.
So you can find out more by going to helenaagra.com.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Hey, maximize your yields while spreading out your workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal from KWS Seeds. Visit kws.com/ca to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856. Long time. Okay, let's talk about the markets here on this Wednesday edition of RealAg Radio. Let's bring in Neil Townsend, lead market analyst with GrainFox. Hey, Neil, how's it going?
It's going very well. How is it going with you?
Pretty good. The weather nice and summerly in Winnipeg?
Yeah, I mean, I think the weather is actually it's hot. And I think that what's happened in Western Canada is we started off more benign and now we've turned into definitely, is it a broad-based, completely Western Canada weather story? Maybe not, but certainly weather is becoming more of an issue, and it's the heat, the dryness. There are all the forest fires, so a lot of farmers contend that the smoke is a bit of a mitigating factor on the crops. I mean, time will tell, but we're definitely hearing a lot of anecdotes of crops maybe going the wrong direction. Again, I would say it doesn't add up to the entirety of Western Canada, and maybe we could still end up at around about an average yield, but I think the betting money right now would be below average, but keeping in mind that 2021 has really skewed the average. So maybe an Olympic average without 2021 in it.
Yeah, there is below average areas, because I've heard it from farmers on the Farmer Rapid Fire, but you got to look at the map and see where they are, and you just can't talk to one person then extrapolate that across, a 200-kilometer radius. We have knocked back some yield from that optimum yield curve for sure, or where we thought the yield was going to be 4 to 6 weeks ago. And probably we won't know till we get those combines rolling to know how impacted we have been. I'm still hearing from a lot of growers that average to maybe a little bit more. I'm not hearing a lot below, maybe in the southern tips of all three provinces where people are saying a little bit more of that below average, but this is this fun time. This is where there's opportunity because you have people betting in different directions on the market. So that's there's opportunity there for sure. I let off talking about hybrid rye. Do you have any rye market updates for us? That's a little bit off in the wilderness. How is that? Have you followed the rye market at all?
A little bit. I mean, I think the thing with rye is that there's been some, as the winter rye came and, the harvest started and stuff like that, there's been some immediate demand. But I think the rye market, like a lot of markets, it hasn't totally capitulated, right, but it is keeping its eye very closely on what's happening with the corn in the United States. And that's one driver sort of as a cover crop down there. And I mean, as corn sort of goes down in value, I think it does call into question whether, the rye demand will be as solid as it is for that one component of it, and that's probably a big issue is there's a lot of contemplation in the United States just about corn and as long as the corn price kind of stays where it's sort of hovering and, does that work for US farmers? I mean, they're going to plant, let me be clear, but I mean, there's going to be maybe some more disincentive, but there'll also be a stronger urge to yield your way to freedom, so to speak, yield your way to profit. So I don't know how rye works into that exactly, but I do know that, rye is sort of a little bit more of a mixed bag right now because of the circumstances in the corn market.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of commodities just looking at corn and really particular attention to where these closes are, right? That's what I continue to hear from a lot of people. We're if you look at that Dees corn market, for example, we're continue to just bounce around that $4 mark, and I think everybody's a little bit on edge about it, to be honest with you, because everybody knows that no matter what commodity you're following, especially in the grains, all roads lead to corn. But maybe we'll come back to corn. Let's talk about canola. We've got November canola trading at the time of us doing this discussion about $6.23. What can you tell us about canola? As we talked earlier about, we have pulled back some of that yield expectation due to that heat at flowering time. What's the outlook on the market?
Well, I mean, again, I think that canola is one of those crops where there's a lot of doubt. Probably the crop, we started off talking about the heat, and I think canola is the crop that we've heard the most about, where farmers have sort of said, I'm not sure how it's doing. I'm worried that it's drying out, that if a big wind comes, it might shatter. That being said, I don't think anybody has a really good perspective right now on what the yield is. It's very, very hard to count and calculate what your canola yield is just by looking and even by trying to get in there and pulling out the pods. I mean, it's a very inexact science. It's just too difficult to do. So it is a wait and see. I mean, I'm not expecting sort of a trend yield with canola. We have the average kind of at around, maybe around 37, but that calculates in the 2021 year. So the actual average is probably if you had Olympic average it would be a little bit higher. But right now we're sort of contemplating a 38.5 bushel an acre yield, so a little bit above average. But again, we have had a lot of anecdotes telling us about worry. We'll see if that comes to fruition, right? The thing about the canola market, and it's interesting because we stalled out on corn to talk about canola, but I think there's some parallels between the canola and the corn market in the sense that there's storylines that are happening in other jurisdictions. And in corn, those storylines don't seem to be having an impact, or they're having an impact, and we're just too, neutral to see just how bullish those storylines are impacting a market, which might be down at around 350 or 330 without those storylines. So I don't know, but basically Europe and the Black Sea region have suffered both for oil seeds and for corn. The corn condition in places like Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, and southern Russia have been deteriorating due to like extreme heat and more or less a drought. Also, the same thing has damaged oil seeds such as sunflowers and the soybeans that are produced in those regions. And the canola crop, which is a winter crop in most of those areas, wasn't great. I mean, it wasn't as badly impacted, obviously, as the summer crops, but it was impacted. But the canola in the rest of the European Union, in France and Germany, in particular France, have had been really poor results. And they've been poor results both on a yield and a quality and an oil content side of things. So, it's not a human food, obviously, in the European Union. It's an industrial product and an animal feed. But the thing is that, they are going to have a higher import need if they're going to fill their biofuels and all that with rapeseed. And the fact that sunflower and sunflower oil is going to be less available from Ukraine, for example, because their crop is being really devastated by this weather, also opens the door for incremental usage of rapeseed. So then you turn to North America, and yeah, the S&D in North America looks a little bit healthier. Again, it's one of these things with canola in Canada, is if you go and ask any of the line companies and lots of the independent analysts, somewhere along the line, they've deviated from Statistics Canada and added in like 2 or 3 million tons of production, or a mysterious 2 or 3 million tons that end up on the ending stocks from a year like in 2020 or 2019 or something. And they've carried that forward. So the straight Statistics Canada data looks more bullish than what all of the real operators, the guys with money, sort of think it is. So I think that's one thing that sort of weighs on the cash market of canola. But the futures are obviously, multifaceted. They do a lot of things. They pay attention to the cash market, but they're also paying attention to the soybeans and the oil seeds and all that. And you can just see sort of the whipsaw moment we've been having since really, middle of summer there, end of June, I guess the start of summer. Sorry, let me rephrase that. But the trend, we've kind of gone up and then down and then up and then down. It will be interesting on the next upswing, say, when we get better data on the harvest and sort of we cool down a bit on the bearishness in the soybean front. It'll be interesting to see if the next high is a higher high, or if we don't do that, because we've had two higher highs in a row.
I was just looking at that. I was just going to ask you about that. There's a positive indication there. If we can go, we can create a new high in the short term. If you look at the 1-year chart on November canola, you can clearly see it. But that's a bullish possibility to look at technically. But on the negative side, technically, you say, boy, I really hope that we don't have some sort of a trade below 600, because we continue to bounce off of that 600, and closing below that or pushing through that could be a real technical bearish indicator. So there's two ways to look at this chart.
Absolutely. And I really think that soybeans hold the key, and soybeans are obviously, sitting and contemplating exactly what the situation is. And again, if we extend the time horizon beyond, say, just, October, when we might have the final results of the U.S. crop, looming in the background is, the chance that South America has a more representative crop in 24, 25. And, that is going to be the real variable that shapes the second half of our marketing year, is what is the prospect for South America. And again, remember that we got helped by a lot of factors in 23, 24, drought and then severe flooding in southern Brazil, Argentine weather that wasn't optimal. So, they didn't come in with it was a huge crop, but not a massive crop. But the prospect for next year is like an all-time record and two very large crops, at least in Argentina and Brazil. And I mean, that does worry me because, people are sort of fretting over sort of $10.50, soybeans. But if the South American crop hits and there isn't really a storyline in the U.S. because, we're looking at a 350 to 450 million bushel carryout on soybeans. I mean, that is going to be a struggle. And of course, that will have an impact on canola. I mean, canola can only do so much on its own without kind of casting an eye on the alternatives like, palm oil, soybeans, sunflowers, as I mentioned. And obviously the key one is soybeans and then probably palm oil second. But, it's going to be an interesting year because I think things are set up for, something where we need some sort of signs of incremental demand. Yeah. And the one thing that we were kind of hoping for seems to be getting the can kicked down the road a bit, and that's this renewable diesel buzz, right? And there's still a lot of contemplation of what's going on in the U.S. I think the Chevron exclusion and, that kind of court case there has also raised the possibility that there'll be more sort of bogged down in the courts about the whole renewable diesel aspect. And,
Neil, former President Trump talking about how, the military using biofuels, or the Biden administration forcing the military to potentially use biofuels. And we're stopping that day one. Yeah. All of a sudden, people that are proponents of the SAF market are like, whoa, hold on here, right? There's some concern again. So that creates some political risk in that market as well.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous political risk, broadly speaking. I mean, I couldn't call the U.S. election right now. It seems too close. It seems like, I think the Democrats probably win the popular vote, but that's not how they decide who the president is. It's going to be very close. It's going to be contested. There might be a lot of litigation about that. We know that there's a friendly Supreme Court. But the bottom line is the one thing that scares me the most as a trading country is there's a lot of discussion of tariffs and trade wars and things like that. And I just think in general, even though you might think, well, Canada might benefit from, the U.S. imposing a lot of tariffs on China, it just makes the world a lot less sort of, liquid, shall we say. It becomes more cumbersome and it becomes more unpredictable, right? And so I hope that, if Trump does become the president, maybe some of his more, stronger talk on China. And again, I do think China isn't really playing fair in the realm of trade. So they need to be brought to heel a little bit, but I hope it's not like a blanket tariff on everybody. And, those kind of tariffs that they're thinking of imposing on China would cause a lot of friction. I like it better when he did sort of the phase one trade deal. It ended up being beneficial for everybody because it tightened the U.S. ending stocks and raised prices for everybody. And so I prefer a negotiated settlement as opposed to, some sort of animosity or, a frictional kind of settlement.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I still think that the policy on how to deal with China is not that different in either administration based on what we've seen out of the USTR. And the other thing about the phase one deal that does concern me now versus then is that China was able to gobble up commodities based on their commitment in the largest grain contract ever negotiated, which was that phase one deal. Their economy is not the same as it was at that time. So they're not, those tariffs and those sanctions, they're going to impact China's economy even more in this case, which is actually what, I guess the U.S. government is trying to accomplish. But hey, let's take a break. We've got more here coming up with Neil Townsend of GrainFox when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. We're talking markets here today with Neil Townsend of GrainFox. Make sure you download the GrainFox app. Fantastic app. It provides you with a whole bunch of marketing advice. There's numerous different levels based on the membership or the subscription level that you're looking for and the kind of assistance that you need. So please check it out. Go to GrainFox's website and do that download through the different app stores. Hey, the answer to above ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. Okay, Neil, one of the crops that we don't talk about a lot, but I've been hearing a lot of noise from our audience, that is durum. And there is a thought out there, and this makes sense. Canada's a big, a big producer of durum in the world. It's an important crop, but it's grown in the more dry areas of Western Canada, and farmers are seeing their yield go back, on a day-by-day basis because of how hot and dry it's been. Some say a bushel a day, some say a bushel and a half a day, whatever. It's going down. Is there some buoyancy to this durum market right now? How should we be looking at it?
Well, unfortunately, no, there isn't.
Oh, Neil, come on. Really? Oh, crap.
There was just a Tunisian tender. Canada really wasn't a participant, but the back off to Western Canada would have been at best about $7.50 a bushel, which is, way below the market here. But it's indicative of sort of one of the big changes that's happened in the durum market over the last year. Unfortunately, we've seen more participation from non-traditional exporters of the raw durum, one of them being Russia. And Russia is contemplated as maybe having done some of the business to Tunisia. But the main culprit is Turkey. And Turkey made a decision to sort of mill pasta out of regular wheat or just non-durum wheat and export their durum last year. And that had a pretty big impact on the market because Canada was on a short crop. And we just didn't get the level of sort of demand pull that we thought we'd see. And that seems to be what's going to maybe happen a little bit in 24-25 as well, with a couple changes. One is that supposedly the European Union has made a prohibitive tariff on Russian durum, so that won't access the European market, and maybe that opens the door for a little bit more incremental North American imports for Europe. Europe didn't have the greatest crops, although Spain had a bit of a bounce back. Morocco had a terrible crop. So in Western Canada, like early in the season when we sort of had more like Garden of Eden conditions in your area and southern Alberta and southwest Saskatchewan, we were contemplating maybe having a 7.5 million ton crop of durum. That's off the table now, as you say, like the weather conditions just haven't been favorable enough. Unfortunate for the individual farmers, but for the collective, I think having a little bit less durum, taking 1 million, 1.5 million off that number. So instead of a 7.5 million, maybe having like a 6 million crop, and our southern neighbors in the U.S. suffering some of the same weather conditions. So them, instead of having a 3 or 4 million ton crop, maybe they'll have like a 2 million ton crop. That actually probably serves the market a little well. And having a little bit shorter exportable surplus probably serves Canada well. I don't think there'll be a broad-based repair in the prices until we see some indications about how crops look in the Middle East and in North Africa, sort of, Jan, Feb, March of next year. But it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. When I thought that their crop would be 7 to 7.5 million tons, I contemplated durum trading below spring wheat. But I think with the smaller crop and sort of the conditions remaining threatening, that prospect is probably diminished. I think durum will maintain some premium over spring wheat. But, spring wheat is also a market where prices probably won't be as buoyant as they were last year. So, add in a little bit to that, and you're probably looking at, it's going to be hard to get double digits for durum consistently in 24-25, unfortunately.
Let's broad brush it. I've got two decisions. I'm going to take my lumps and I'm going to move my durum crop off the combine.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go old school durum grower and pretend like I'm growing canary seed. I'm going to put it in the bin and I'm just going to hold. Like and I know there's lots of strategies in between all of that, but which one is probably, and obviously everyone's got different cash flow situations. I'm just, in the purest sense, which way am I going on those two strategies?
Well, I don't want to take avoid the question, but I think a hybrid strategy of that.
Okay.
I think that there's always, when you're looking around the world, there is a lot of sort of unknowns and, the old Rumsfeldian quote, the unknown unknowns. And I mean, things can change. So I do think that there's enough durum that's going to try and get into the pipeline that probably selling right at harvest might not be the best strategy. So you might want to use your storage to kind of store it for a little while or sell prior to harvest if you need cash flow that. And I would kind of say move about 50% of your crop and then the other 50%, but sometime before Christmas.
Yep.
And then the other 50%, I think you'd kind of, play the longer game on it. And the reason I play the longer game is things can turn pretty fast, both in terms of, political stability in some of the countries that we're talking about, but also in the weather conditions in those countries. And I think just if you look right now, like, you and I could do a whole half hour on just you throw out a country and I tell you what kind of extreme weather they're experiencing right now. Now, whether that's just because we're more informed than we were 20 years ago, or if there's in fact more weather circumstances, like my good friend Dan Bassi just sent me a Twitter feed from China. And it's just a guy who shows you all the extreme weather that's happening in China. Like China is a big place, but I was just amazed that like in the last 48 hours, there's like heat of like 48 degrees in some places, extreme floods, like rivers that have never been that high. Like, I just mean, like, is that just because I'm more informed that's always been happening? Or is it because, something is actually happening? So in the world of durum, because it's concentrated in areas that are already sort of very finite for how they're doing because they don't have high levels of water involved in it. I mean, the lack of water or extreme heat, I mean, we could see, the Spanish durum crop go really backwards next year again. We could see Morocco continue in this drought. We could see Algeria and Tunisia join them. And the one country that I'm focused on that could have some circumstances that, make it a little bit more bullish is Turkey. And again, Turkish weather conditions will start to matter as soon as we sort of flip the calendar. So I just think we're going to have to watch and wait and see because, the durum market has a lot of moving parts to it, but the overall, truth of the matter is that, we're sort of in a downtrend right now, which has started maybe, last year. But the one thing is that the Canadian crop, and we have to wait to see the final result, because the weather conditions in the durum areas still continues to be saying that it's going to be dry for sure.
Hot.
And also hot. So, what the final yield is going to be. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like a disaster level kind of production, but it's certainly not going to be with a 7 to start it. And, we'll see how low towards 6 we can get. And maybe it turns into a 5 million, 5+ million ton crop if these weather conditions hold. And again, poor result for individual farmers, but probably collectively for the durum industry in Canada, a positive price impact from that somehow.
Okay, Neil, I know you got to go. Final question, okay? Give me the crop that you feel has the best story relative to higher prices. Is there one where you feel like, okay, here's the crop, here's the narrative. I'm not guaranteeing it, of course. There's no guarantee in life except for death and taxes. But give me the commodity. What are you thinking?
Well, we covered canola pretty extensively, but I think the one that I'm going to say is, quality spring wheat. I think we saw great marketing conditions for spring wheat in 23-24. Canada exported a lot of it. I mean, maybe the price wasn't quite as exciting or as sexy as the farmers wanted it to be, but we looked this year at the spring wheat market, and this is what we'd say, and just the wheat market in general, that okay, the U.S. has a little bit more hard red winter wheat. They might have a slightly bigger spring wheat crop overall. They might have more exportable surplus. Will they export it? Probably not. It's very hard to get it out of there. And it's basically like it's the lowest price in the world. But people are not buying it right now. It's hard to get it out. It's hard to get it from the farmers, whatever. It's hard to get it. So Canada's in a unique position. And then we look at the European Union. I mean, the France crop is an absolute disaster. and it's terrible quality. I mean, again, it's not, nobody's comparing French wheat to CWRS. I mean, you know, that's like, I don't know if France is known for their wines or stuff like that, but I mean, it's like, you know, you don't compare that to something like a Trader Joe's, some of the quality wine. But I'm just saying, like, basically the thing is that Canada's in a unique position. Russia's going to have less, Ukraine's going to have less, Romania's not going to have maybe as much as they contemplated earlier because the weather conditions. It remains to be seen what Australia is going to produce. There is a La Nina there. So I just think Canada has this unique chance to really keep going with this 450 to 550,000 tons of wheat pushing out every year. We're coming in with a relatively tight, or almost a historically tight ending stocks for wheat in Western Canada. So I see that, you know, relative to other crops, farmers are going to get a lot of phone calls on their wheat at some point in the year. I can't really say that prices are all relative. Obviously, if corn is going to be in that $4 range, that sort of caps the upside to wheat. But if we start to get into a situation where these weather conditions persist in the European Union, like we haven't seen the rainfall streak broken in France in any big way yet. If we are wet in the fall there, I mean, that would portend that the French wheat crop is under risk again. So we start to get into a period of time where people will be watching the weather conditions for winter wheat in the Black Sea and in France and in Germany and these places. And there could be a positive storyline, which then also increases the veracity with which people would want to buy the best thing. And then the final thing I'll say, you know, we mentioned China. And you mentioned China and their economy and everything like that. Like, one thing we just do not have great information on right now is what's the reality on the ground in terms of the Chinese crops. We keep hearing that they produced record crops, but who's telling us that? The Chinese are. But then you look at the weather conditions and all of the things that are happening there, and you kind of think, is this actually good for corn? Is this good for wheat? I don't think it's good for wheat. I don't think it's good for corn. Have they got some varieties we don't know about? So I would just say that, you know, those crops also matter. And then the final one I'll say for wheat, and, you know, we're coming into the season when we'll start to be talking about the Indian wheat crop, but India cannot afford to have a crop that starts to sizzle up in, you know, February and March of next year. So I would say for wheat growers in Canada, you should get a weather app that shows you the temperatures in the Punjab. And if those get to be like 45, 46, 47, in, you know, on March 15th, which they've been the last few years, you know, that's probably a good sign that eventually India is going to have to capitulate and become a global importer of wheat. And if they start to import, it's not going to be 1 or 2 million tons. I think it's going to be 5, 10, 15 million tons. And once they break sort of the reality that, you know, they're facing a lot of struggles to be self-sufficient on wheat, you know, that could be a perpetual thing that is very beneficial to the wheat market. But short term, I like wheat. Long term, I like wheat.
I like it. I like it. Awesome. I like when we're talking about prices going higher for some of the for the farmers out there. Hey, that is Neil Townsend with GrainFox. Make sure you go to grainfox.ca to find out more about this great product that Neil is a big part of. Hey, Neil, thanks for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Shaun.
Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's now time for a product spotlight with SeCan. And we're talking to SeCan's Western Business Manager. It is Todd Hyra, based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hey, Todd, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks, Shaun.
Hey, now you're out in the field right now. Where are you?
We are at Ag Smart in Olds, Alberta.
Nice. Weather treating you well?
The weather is great. It's plots look good, and looking forward to hopefully some good interaction with farmers today.
Nice, absolutely. And I know one of the things you're going to be talking to farmers about is the opportunity for winter wheat on the Western Canadian prairies. Todd, why do you think that more farmers should be considering winter wheat?
Well, I think we've seen a dramatic shift in the quality and performance of these products, and just looking at trying to spread out the busy workload in spring, and watching with the struggles of getting the crop in the ground with all the spring crops, the winter cereals look like a pretty good option. And so having winter wheat put them in the fall and spread that workload throughout the year, spread out the risk of disease and insect pressure, it seems like an opportunity for producers to consider.
And is there situations where it's the best fit?
Well, in areas that on land that may be difficult to get in on the spring, there's the fact you can get some of those acres taken care of in the fall certainly offers that opportunity. Having the crop in the ground, able to take advantage of spring moisture and any of the winter snow trap, also gives the potential for an increased yield boost. There's probably some reluctance for producers to drag the drill out in the fall, but that's the way off, I guess you'd have to consider.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like you kind of mentioned, it's that lightening of that workload in the spring, but it's not just workload in the spring. It's also an opportunity to, when we do have spring moisture, like we did this past year, where we can't get out in the field maybe as quickly as we want to. We've already got a crop seeded. We've already got a crop started. It's able to take care of that. It's able to take advantage of that early moisture better than a spring planted crop.
No, absolutely. That's the whole gist of it. The opportunity to beat the disease, to take advantage of the moisture, be ahead of some of the insects, and have that crop actually off earlier in the season, so that you can maybe time the market a little bit with some of that when you're bringing wheat in late July or early August, as opposed to waiting till a month later.
And of course, there's quality differences between spring wheat and winter wheat in Western Canada, but there's also yield differences between the two as well.
Well, when you're able to take advantage of that full spring cooler flowering period, there's certainly the ability to put on some more yield.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of SeCan's lineup, I know you're probably discussing some of this there at AgSmart this week, but in general, what are some of the winter wheat varieties that SeCan has in its portfolio that farmers should be maybe asking some of their local retailers about?
So AAC Wildfire is our go-to. It would be it's the number one winter wheat in Western Canada right now, so that's probably the most widely available variety, and can't go wrong with that one. Been in the market now for 4 years. And then we've got two new ones we're launching this year. One is AAC Cold Front, which is also out of the Ag Canada program at Lethbridge. And it offers a little bit of a yield bump, a little stronger straw, and a little shorter, stronger straw than something like Wildfire. And then the last one is AAC Overdrive, which is it's kind of a Falcon replacement. If anybody thinks back a few years to Falcon, it was early, short, strong straw. And AAC Overdrive is that type of package with an improved disease resistance. So it has a really nice fit in eastern prairies.
Well, find and you know who they are because they're living in your local communities. Your local SeCan seed rep, a seed grower. Please talk to them and ask them about some of these varieties. And you can also go and find out more and get the tech sheets and some information on some of the varieties by going to SeCan.com. Todd, thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Shaun. Have a great day.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio with the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. and a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGly.ca.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Yesterday, I had a prep call for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference that is coming up here shortly, August 19th through the 22nd in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan. We're doing a live broadcast of RealAg Radio. You'll be able to hear it here on the radio and the podcast, but why not see it in person? Come to the event. That's right. You can visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com to find out full details and to register. You can learn how to increase profit, manage rangeland, and navigate trends. So looking forward to that event. It was a great one last year. Fabulous. And I'm sure this year will not disappoint. I think it's the first time that CBIC has been in Saskatchewan. So it's going to be a great time for who doesn't have fun at a cattle meeting? Cattle meetings they can be the most fun. Those cowboys and cowgirls know how to have a good time, and we'll whoop up Saskatchewan. Okay, enough corny jokes. Okay, let's get on to the top ag news stories of the day here. Canada's economy likely gathered some momentum in the second quarter and surpassed Bank of Canada growth estimates. Well, this is good news. The data was shown on Wednesday as high interest rates failed to dampen an uptick in manufacturing and oil transportation. However, retail and wholesale sales continue to be subdued, weighing on growth. Canada's domestic product grew by 0.2% in May. Statistics Canada said, adding that a preliminary estimate for June shows the economy probably expanded by 0.1%, taking the quarterly economic growth rate to 2.2%. Also, of course, the central bank lowered its benchmark rate for a second straight month last week and indicated its focus was shifting to boosting the economy. Okay, so we're following this. How quickly do these lowering of rate changes create rev up that economic engine, so to speak? The bank expects growth to pick up in the second half of 24, led by stronger exports and a recovery in household spending as borrowing costs ease. And the Canadian dollar, relative to the U.S. dollar, still stuck around that 72 cents. It really hasn't moved that much, even with rates lowering. And hey, there is a full expectation. We're doing this show prior to the Federal Reserve making its decision on interest rates. The expectation was they were going to hold on rates. Everybody looking to the September Jackson Hole meeting, where we potentially could see that first rate reduction in 4 years in the U.S. So we'll follow up on that probably on Friday's show during the Real Ag Issues panel. A new soybean crush plant in North Dakota, about 150 miles from the Canada-U.S. border, has started receiving soybeans as it ramps up operations. This story from RealAgriculture.com. The North Dakota soybean processors facility at Castleton, North Dakota, just west of Fargo, has been designed to process 125,000 bushels per day and 42.5 million bushels in its first year. The plant will produce refined soybean oil for renewable fuel and food uses, as well as soy meal and soy hull pellets for livestock feed. A ribbon cutting ceremony and tours are planned for Wednesday, August 7th. So that's next week. Next Wednesday would be the 7th. So who doesn't love a good ribbon cutting ceremony, some cake, some coffee, cold one, good stuff. It's good to see investment in increased processing capacity in the northern tier. Now, we've had some equipment manufacturers putting out their earnings, and we've talked about the AEM flash numbers for June. Pretty weak new equipment market. AGCO is out with their earnings, and AGCO reported net sales of $3.2 billion for the second quarter ended June 30th. That sounds like that's a big number, $3.2 billion. The trouble is it's a decrease of 15.1% compared to the second quarter of 23. Reported net loss was $4.92 per share for the second quarter of 2024, which includes the estimated loss on the grain and protein business held for sale, and adjusted net income for $2.53 per share, including unfavorable foreign currency translation of 0.9%. Like, what went well here? Net sales in the second quarter of 2024 decreased 14.2% compared to the second quarter of 2023. And of course, AGCO sold their GSI and Kimbria grain businesses last week that took a loss on that acquisition. Good story in the Globe and Mail about whether or not Canada is doing enough on the relationship front with the U.S. in prep for some potential unstable days ahead or months ahead here when it comes to trade relations with the U.S. And the article points out in his opinion column, but it points out something that we've been talking about for a long time here at RealAg Radio, which is, Canada's going to put on the charm offensive when it comes to the benefits of free trade between the U.S. and Canada. And of course, Mexico's included in this too. And I think Canada's going to get a bit of a cooler response from even some of the friendly members of Congress, even at the state level, than they previously did the last time there was any sort of a renegotiation. Now, is it for sure there's going to be a renegotiation of this trade deal? Well, but I think there's an expectation, whether it's a Democrat or Republican in the White House, that they're going to want to make some changes. You think about the pro-union support of the Democrat side, some of the promises that President Trump has made in terms of, nobody likes to shake the tree of a trade deal more than President Trump. So there's some pretty rough waters ahead here for Canada. And this trade deal is absolutely important. We heard yesterday, Nathan Finney with CCA, he said on this show, 70% of Canadian beef production gets exported to the U.S., right? So important. Bird flu. The outbreak of bird flu, specifically the H5N1 avian influenza virus, has significantly impacted county fairs across the U.S., prompting various measures to mitigate the risk of spreading the virus among animals and humans. County fairs are adapting to the bird flu outbreak by implementing stringent biosecurity measures, adjusting operational protocols, and emphasizing public health guidelines to ensure the safety of both animals and visitors. And finally, President Biden will receive a briefing today on the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. This morning, USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack and Steve Benjamin, Senior Advisor to the President and White House Director of Public Engagement, will hold a press call to announce the next steps in USDA's effort to implement the IRA. Lawmakers urge Janet Yellen to limit biofuel tax credit to domestic producers. A bipartisan group of lawmakers in a letter called on Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to ensure that the biofuel tax credits under the Clean Fuel Production Credit, also known as Section 45Z, are limited to domestic producers. This initiative is part of a broader effort to protect U.S. agriculture and biofuel industries from the adverse impacts of foreign competition, particularly from the influx of used cooking oil, the UCO is what it's called, which are often used as feedstock for biofuel production. So now, how potential changes, and 45Z does impact also where does Canadian canola fit in here, as obviously there's an opportunity for Canadian produced canola to be a part as a feedstock for some of the renewable diesel production and SAF in the U.S. So lots of unanswered questions when it comes to 45Z for sure, and definitely something that we are following closely at Real Agriculture. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? If you're in Saskatchewan, what are your thoughts on the impact that former Ag Minister Lyle Stewart had on the industry? We'd appreciate thoughts on that or any issue or thing that is happening in agriculture. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will, of course, chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.